At 6:12 on a Friday evening, the woman in the silver dress looked at my muddy boots and told me people like me were not allowed through the hotel's front lobby. At 7:03, my name would appear in red letters on every screen in the building. But at that moment, no one cared who I was. My name is Dr. Elena Marquez. I was 48 years old that night, and for 26 years, I had designed buildings to survive floods, earthquakes, fires, and every other disaster people preferred to believe would never happen. The Breakwater Crown was supposed to be my greatest achievement. The hotel stood on a black rock headland outside Port Orison, Oregon. Its 6 floors of cedar, steel, and glass faced the Pacific Ocean, while its enormous west ballroom extended over the cliff on a reinforced terrace. Travel magazines had called it an architectural miracle. I had called it a beautiful building in a dangerous place. That was why I arrived at its opening gala wearing an old yellow raincoat, work pants, and boots covered in mud. Instead of spending the afternoon getting my hair done, I had been inspecting a drainage channel half a mile down the slope. A county technician had sent me photographs of the channel that morning, and something about them had bothered me. By the time I reached the hotel, rainwater was dripping from my hair and my phone was dead. None of that should have mattered. My invitation was waiting at the front desk. My name was printed on the evening program. Keynote address: Dr. Elena Marquez, Engineer of Record. I was also the only person outside the county fire marshal's office authorized to activate the hotel's highest emergency protocol. But no one asked me about that. A young receptionist named Tessa Bell greeted me when I entered the lobby. She was 24 and looked kind, although her smile became uncertain when she noticed my clothes. "Are you with Coastal Mechanical?" she asked. "No, I'm here for the gala." Her eyes moved from my muddy boots to the spotless white carpet. "May I have your name?" "Elena Marquez." She typed it into her computer. A second later, her eyes widened with recognition. Before she could speak, a woman in a silver evening dress stepped between us. I recognized her from planning emails. Celeste Rowan, 36, Director of Guest Experience. We had never met in person, but I remembered her as the woman who had once asked us to move an emergency exit because its red sign ruined the symmetry of a wall. "What seems to be the issue?" she asked. "There isn't one," I replied. "I'm checking in for the opening gala. The contract reception is downstairs." "I'm not a contractor. Vendors, contractors, and temporary employees must use the East Service entrance." Her smile was perfectly controlled. "It helps us protect the guest experience." Beyond her, a string quartet played beside the ballroom doors. Men in tuxedos and women in silk dresses drank champagne beneath a screen displaying images of the hotel. In a few hours, I was supposed to stand in front of those people and explain how we had built it. "My name is on your guest list," I said. "I'm sure someone from your company is expected." "I am my company." Celeste studied me more carefully. Her expression did not show curiosity. It showed calculation. She was deciding how firmly she could remove me without creating an embarrassing scene. I placed my driver's license and engineering credential on the desk. "Please verify the photograph and open the record Tessa just found." Celeste did not touch either card. "We have donors and members of the press arriving," she said. "I cannot delay the front desk over a misunderstanding." "It will take 10 seconds. I have already explained where you need to go." A man behind me laughed. He was perhaps 55, dressed in a velvet dinner jacket and wearing a gold watch large enough to catch the chandelier's light. "Opening night," he murmured to his companion, "and maintenance already wants a seat at the bar." The woman beside him hid a smile behind her champagne glass. Several guests began watching us. Not one of them knew my name, yet they had already accepted Celeste's version of who I was. Tessa tried to intervene. "Miss Rowan, the record says she's." Celeste reached across the desk and put the computer screen to sleep. "Thank you, Tessa. I'll handle this." Then she signaled to a security officer standing near the revolving doors. His badge identified him as Nolan Price, security supervisor. He was 41, broad-shouldered, and wearing the exhausted expression of a man who found it easier to give orders than ask questions. "This woman needs to be escorted to the service level," Celeste told him. "She is refusing directions." "I asked her to verify my identification," I said. Nolan glanced at the cards on the desk, but did not pick them up. Ma'am, let's not make tonight more difficult than it needs to be. For whom? His jaw tightened. I could have raised my voice. I could have pointed to my name on the program or demanded that they call the hotel's owner. I could have stopped the quartet and introduced myself to the entire lobby. But I had learned long ago how quickly anger could be used against a woman who had already been judged. If I remained calm, I was merely someone they believed did not belong. If I became angry, I would become their proof. I returned my identification to my wallet. I'll use the service entrance, I said. Celeste relaxed. But first, I want this entered in the security log. Her smile disappeared. Excuse me? Write that I presented photo identification and asked you to verify my name. Write that you refused. Include the time in both of your names. That isn't necessary, Nolan said. It is to me. The guests continued watching. The man in the velvet jacket checked his watch as if my humiliation were delaying his evening. Nolan finally removed a tablet from his belt. 6:14, he said. Guest access dispute. Individual redirected to service entrance. Add that you refuse to verify my identification. I wrote what happened. No, I said quietly, you wrote what protects you. For 1 second, something changed in his expression. He knew I was right, and that made him dislike me even more. Celeste stepped closer to him. Take her downstairs. Nolan led me through a gray door beside the coat check. The moment it closed, the music vanished. The service corridor smelled of hot bread, detergent, and wet wool. Fluorescent lights buzzed above employees carrying wine crates, folded linens, and trays of food. The luxury upstairs depended on hundreds of people below it working without ever being seen. Nolan pointed toward a freight elevator. Contractor reception is on level B2. I told you I'm not a contractor. Then whoever hired you can sort it out. The elevator doors opened. Before I stepped inside, I heard a sound beneath the kitchen noise. Thump. Silence. Thump. Silence. The vibration traveled through the soles of my boots. I turned toward the western end of the corridor. Where is your stormwater pump room? Nolan stared at me. Ask maintenance. One of the pumps is short cycling. Get in the elevator, ma'am. The sound came again. Thump. This time I counted the pause. 7 seconds. It should have been at least 40. I tightened my grip on my field case and looked down the corridor. The people upstairs had judged me by my muddy clothes and sent me away before learning my name. But somewhere behind those concrete walls, the ocean had just given me a warning. And unlike them, I intended to listen. I stepped away from the freight elevator. Nolan immediately moved in front of me. Do not wander through restricted areas. Then call your chief engineer, I said. Tell him Elena Marquez heard the west stormwater pump cycling every 7 seconds. Before Nolan could answer, a young man pushing a laundry cart stopped beside us. He was thin, with black hair falling over his forehead. His badge read, Jamie Park, Facilities Trainee. Did you say the west pump? He asked. Yes. Jamie glanced nervously at Nolan. The warning panel has been flashing all afternoon. Keep moving, Nolan ordered. Jamie gripped the cart but did not leave. I reported it to Mr. Vale, he continued. He said the sensor was defective. Then the alarm started beeping during the catering setup, so he had someone mute it. What time? Around 4:30. Did anyone inspect the pump? I tried. The intake gauge kept jumping, but Mr. Vale said opening night wasn't the time for a trainee to invent problems. Another vibration traveled through the floor. Thump. The pause was shorter this time. I opened my field case and removed a vibration meter. Show me the pump room. Nolan's hand moved toward his radio. Jamie, if you take her anywhere, you can turn in your badge. Jamie went pale. He was only 22, probably in his first serious job, and one decision could cost him everything. Then the pump struck again. Jamie pushed the laundry cart aside. It's this way. We hurried down a sloping service corridor while Nolan followed behind us, warning us to stop. By the time Jamie unlocked the second fire door, I could smell seawater. That frightened me more than the noise. Rainwater smelled like pavement and soil. Seawater carried salt, rust, and kelp. It did not belong inside a corridor protected by a reinforced retaining wall. Jamie opened the pump room door. The sound hit us like a hammer. 2 vertical pumps stood inside a concrete pit. The left one shook violently each time it started. The right one was completely silent. A yellow warning light flashed on the control panel, but someone had taped a folded cocktail napkin over the alarm speaker. The water level rose as we watched. What does that mean? Nolan asked. It means the backup pump is dead, I replied. The primary pump is pulling against an obstruction. Jamie stared at the gauges. How high is tonight's tide? King tide at 7:18. The storm surge is already ahead of forecast. I crouched beside the control panel. A service tag hung from the latch. Alarm bypass authorized, M. Vale. Take a photograph, I told Jamie. He used his phone while I opened the maintenance cabinet. Inside, I found the inspection sheet from that afternoon. The backup pump had failed its automatic test at 2:10. No repair had been recorded. No replacement had been ordered. Then I saw a hairline crack running along the back wall. A dark thread of water pushed through it. We need to evacuate the west ballroom, I said. Nolan looked toward the ceiling. The ballroom is above us, directly above us. You don't have authority to evacuate a hotel. I have exactly that authority. Footsteps thundered down the corridor before he could respond. Celeste entered with another security officer and a silver-haired man in a tuxedo. His name badge identified him as Grant Vale, the hotel's 52-year-old operations director. I recognized him from months of video meetings. He looked at the open cabinet, the inspection sheet in my hand, and Jamie's phone. His expression changed. What are you doing in here? Your backup pump failed 5 hours ago, I said. The primary outlet is obstructed, the chamber is filling, and someone deliberately muted the alarm. The alarm is defective, Grant replied. The alarm is accurate. You have no idea what you're looking at. I pointed at the water crossing the wall. Then explain that. He did not even turn his head. Celeste folded her arms. Nolan told you to leave. You need to stop the gala and move everyone through the North Gallery. Absolutely not. The live broadcast begins in 20 minutes. So does peak surge. We have elected officials, investors, and international press upstairs. Then you have important people to evacuate. Grant stepped closer. That wall is rated for twice tonight's pressure, with 2 working pumps and an open drainage outlet. The landscaping crew may have covered one outlet, he admitted. We'll clear it after the tide turns. The pressure peaks before the tide turns. For 1 second, neither of us spoke. I knew that look on his face. I had seen it in construction trailers and boardrooms for most of my career. He would rather gamble with 300 lives than admit that the woman in muddy boots understood his building better than he did. Who are you? He demanded. I removed my engineering credential. Before he could read it, Celeste stepped between us. It doesn't matter. Remove her. Nolan hesitated. He had seen the crack and the rising water, but when Celeste repeated the order, he turned toward me. Ma'am, come with us. Jamie, I said, send those photographs to yourself and someone you trust. Grant pointed at the phone. Delete them. Now. It's my phone, Jamie said. Then you no longer work here. Jamie's face drained of color. If you fire him for reporting a safety failure, I told Grant, that will be the most expensive sentence you speak tonight. The pump slammed again. The lights flickered. That was the moment I stopped asking for permission. A red emergency handset was mounted beside the door. I stepped toward it, but the second security officer blocked my path. Nolan looked at the water spreading across the wall. Then he moved the officer aside. Let her call. I lifted the handset. Breakwater Control, a dispatcher answered. This is Dr. Elena Marquez, Oregon Professional License 54719, engineer of record for Breakwater Crown, authenticate Red Harbor. The room went silent. Challenge code, the dispatcher said. I gave him the 6 numbers I had memorized during construction. Identity confirmed, state emergency level. I watched the crack widen. Level 4, evacuate the west wing, lock out the elevators, open the north egress, alert coastal rescue, and transfer the building to emergency control. Level 4 confirmed, emergency mode begins in 10 seconds. Grant reached for the handset. Nolan stepped between us. Don't touch her. I hung up. At 6 seconds, the gala music stopped. At 8, the fire doors released. At 10, every decorative light in the hotel went dark. Blue emergency strips illuminated the floor. Upstairs, the opening night film vanished from every screen and was replaced by a red warning. Red Harbor Level 4 West Wing evacuation authorized by engineer of record Dr. Elena Marquez. Celeste stared at the screen, then slowly turned toward me. You're the keynote speaker. I was. Grant took a step backward. We were told Dr. Marquez was... He stopped. Was what? I asked. Older? Taller? A man? Above us, the evacuation announcement began, and for the first time that evening, everyone listened. Everyone listened for about 3 seconds. Then, 300 frightened guests began talking at once. I followed Nolan up the emergency stairs and entered the ballroom through the west service door. The quartet had stopped playing. Champagne glasses remained raised in frozen hands while red warnings flashed across every screen. Grant Vale pushed past me and grabbed a microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, please remain calm. We are experiencing a minor technical." I took the microphone from him. "This is not a technical malfunction," I said. "The retaining wall beneath this ballroom is taking water. Leave your drinks, coats, and bags. Walk through the north gallery and continue to the upper parking area." A man in a velvet dinner jacket stepped into my path. He was the same guest who had laughed at me in the lobby. "You expect us to run into the rain because a pump stopped working?" "No," I replied. "I expect you to leave because the ocean is entering the building beneath your feet." As if it had heard me, something struck the cliff below us. The entire ballroom shuddered. A chandelier swung overhead. Several glasses slid from a table and shattered against the floor. The man's expression changed. "North Gallery," I repeated. Now. People finally began moving. Tessa opened both gallery doors while Nolan organized security into 2 lines. Celeste stood near the stage, staring at the warning screens as if my name had become more frightening than the evacuation order. "Celeste," I called. "You know the guest areas better than anyone. Check the restrooms, private lounges, and coat room." She looked at me. For the first time that night, she did not argue. She removed her silver heels and ran. The evacuation moved quickly until the lights flickered again. A woman screamed, and several guests rushed toward the main lobby. "Do not use the front entrance," I shouted. The West Terrace had been designed to direct floodwater away from the north escape route, but if the retaining wall failed, the lobby could become a channel. The upper parking area was the safest ground. I stood on a chair and pointed toward the gallery. "Keep moving. Do not run. Help the person beside you." The order gave them something simple to do. Panic became movement. Movement became a line. At 6:42, the last guest crossed into the north gallery. Outside, rain moved sideways beneath the parking lights. Tessa and the catering managers checked names against the event list while paramedics arrived from Port Orison. 300 guests accounted for, Tessa reported. We're checking employees. A kitchen supervisor approached us, shaking badly. "We can't find Lila Chen," she said. "She was sent to the basement pastry storeroom before the alarm." Lila was 19 years old. Before I could answer, Nolan looked around. "Where's Jamie?" The kitchen supervisor swallowed. "He heard us calling for Lila. He went back inside." Of course he had. Jamie had already risked his job to show me the pump room. Now, he was risking his life because no one else had remembered a teenage employee working behind a basement door. I took a flashlight and a rescue line from one of the firefighters. Nolan grabbed my arm. "The rescue team is coming. They don't know the service level. You can guide them. There isn't time." Another impact rolled through the building. I fastened the rescue line around my waist and handed Nolan the other end. "Keep this anchored. If I'm not back in 4 minutes, pull." I re-entered through the north service door. The corridor lights had failed. Blue emergency strips glowed beneath water that already covered my boots. Somewhere ahead, metal screamed against concrete. "Jamie!" I shouted. A faint voice answered from below. I descended to B2. The water reached my knees at the bottom step and pushed hard toward the western corridor. I found Jamie outside the pastry storeroom, striking the door with a fire extinguisher. Blood ran from a cut above his eye. "It's jammed," he yelled. "Lila's inside." Her voice came through the door. "Please don't leave me." "We're not leaving," I called. The pressure had twisted the frame. Jamie and I forced the edge of the extinguisher into the gap and pulled together. The door moved half an inch. Then the primary pump stopped. The sudden silence was worse than any alarm. I looked toward the western wall. A crack raced across the concrete. "Again!" I shouted. Jamie and I pulled until the extinguisher bent. The door opened just wide enough for Lila to squeeze through. She stumbled into my arms, crying and barefoot, with one ankle swollen beneath her uniform. The wall burst. Black water exploded into the corridor. It knocked Jamie off his feet and tore the flashlight from my hand. I caught the back of his jacket while Lila wrapped both arms around a pipe. "Move!" I yelled. We fought toward the stairs as the water rose to my waist. Jamie supported Lila on one side while I held her on the other. At the landing, the upper fire door began to close. Then a hand caught it. Celeste stood on the other side. "I brought the master key," she shouted. She had followed me back into the hotel. We pushed Lila through first. Jamie climbed after her. As I reached the doorway, another surge struck from behind. Celeste lost her grip. The current pulled her off the landing and dragged her toward the flooded corridor. I threw myself down, caught her wrist, and slammed my shoulder against the door frame. For one terrible second, her wet fingers began sliding from mine. She looked up at me with pure terror. "Don't let go." I thought of her refusing to touch my identification. I thought of her ordering security to remove me while strangers laughed. Then I tightened my grip. "I won't." Jamie grabbed my rescue harness and pulled. Together, we dragged Celeste onto the stairs. The four of us reached the north exit seconds before the basement disappeared beneath water. Firefighters carried Lila toward an ambulance. Nolan caught Jamie before he collapsed. Celeste fell to her knees on the pavement, still holding one of my hands. At 7:18, the king tide arrived. The western terrace lifted as if the ocean had placed a shoulder beneath it. Steel supports snapped one after another. The ballroom windows bowed, shattered, and vanished inside a wall of white water. The entire terrace collapsed into the Pacific. People screamed from the parking area as $28 million of glass, cedar, and marble disappeared in less than 10 seconds. But the North Gallery remained standing. So did every person who had been inside the hotel. Celeste stared at the ruins, then looked down at my muddy boots. "You saved us," she whispered. "The warning saved us," I said. Jamie was simply the first person willing to listen. Behind us, police officers surrounded Grant Vale, and this time, when he tried to explain what had happened, everyone was listening for a very different reason. By sunrise, the Breakwater Crown had become the most expensive wreck on the Oregon coast. News helicopters circled above the shattered ballroom. Reporters stood behind police barriers, speaking dramatically about $28 million in damage. Videos of the terrace collapsing spread across the internet before most of the guests had even left the emergency shelter. But only one number mattered to me: 0. 0 guests dead. 0 employees lost. Lila had a fractured ankle. Jamie needed 6 stitches above his eye. Celeste suffered hypothermia and a dislocated shoulder. Several guests were treated for minor injuries, but everyone survived. Grant Vale spent the night telling investigators that no one could have predicted the collapse. By morning, Jamie's photographs proved otherwise. The images showed the failed backup pump, the rising water, the cracked wall, and the cocktail napkin taped over the alarm speaker. The maintenance sheet confirmed that the pump had failed its automatic test 5 hours before the gala. System records showed that Grant had personally authorized the alarm bypass. Then, investigators recovered his emails. At 2:34 that afternoon, the maintenance manager had recommended postponing the gala. Grant replied 6 minutes later, "We are not canceling a $1 million event over a sensor warning. Keep the panel quiet until tomorrow." He had known. The ocean had not surprised him. The pump had not betrayed him. Grant had made a calculation. The danger was invisible. The guests were important, and admitting a problem would embarrass him. He had gambled with 300 lives to protect a party. 3 days after the collapse, I sat before a state investigation panel in a borrowed conference room at Port Orison City Hall. My shoulder was bruised, my hands were covered in cuts, and my muddy boots had finally been cleaned. A board member pushed a diagram toward me. "Dr. Marquez, what caused the western terrace to fail?" The immediate cause was hydrostatic pressure after the stormwater system stopped functioning. And the underlying cause? I looked across the room at Grant. He no longer wore a tuxedo. He sat beside 2 attorneys, staring down at the table. "The underlying cause," I said, "was that several people saw evidence of danger, and one powerful man decided their voices were inconvenient." Grant's lawyer objected. The investigator overruled him. Jamie testified after me. His voice shook at first, but he did not look away when he described reporting the alarm. Tessa explained how she had found my name at the front desk and how Celeste had put the screen to sleep before she could confirm my identity. Even Nolan told the truth. He admitted that I had presented identification and that he had written an incomplete security report because the full version might have made him look negligent. It would have, the investigator said. Yes, Nolan replied. That's why I left it out. Grant was dismissed that afternoon. Criminal charges for reckless endangerment and falsifying safety records followed. His attorneys continued calling the storm an unforeseeable natural disaster, but no one believed that explanation after seeing the napkin over the alarm. The hotel board also reviewed what had happened in the lobby. Security footage showed Celeste refusing to examine my identification. It showed Tessa attempting to speak and being silenced. It showed Nolan escorting me away while guests laughed. That video became almost as famous as the collapse. Millions of people watched the woman in muddy boots being sent through the service entrance. Millions more watched my name appear on every screen 49 minutes later. Commentators called it perfect justice. It did not feel perfect. A collapsed hotel was not justice. Injured employees were not justice. Jamie nearly drowning was not justice. The disaster could not be transformed into something good simply because the people who dismissed me were embarrassed afterward. Celeste visited me 1 week later. Her arm was in a sling, and she wore a plain blue coat instead of silver. I resigned this morning, she said. You could have waited for the board's decision. I already know what I did. She placed an envelope on the table. Inside was a handwritten apology, not only to me, but also to Tessa, Jamie, Lila, and the service employees she had spent years treating as part of the background. I keep thinking about the stairwell, she said. After everything I did, you still came back for me. I didn't come back for you. I came back for Lila and Jamie. But you could have let go. Yes. Her eyes filled with tears. Why didn't you? Because your life did not become valuable after you learned my title, I said. It was valuable when you thought I was nobody. Celeste lowered her head. That was the first apology she offered without trying to protect herself. The board rebuilt more than the damaged hotel. Every employee, regardless of rank, received the authority to stop an event over an immediate safety concern. No manager could silence an alarm without written approval from 2 engineers. Identity disputes had to be verified, not assumed. Reports could no longer be altered by the person being reported. Jamie received a permanent position on my engineering team. On his first day, I gave him a new badge, Jamie Park, Building Safety Engineer. He stared at it for a long time. I was only a trainee, he said. You heard the warning. So did other people. You acted. Tessa became the hotel's guest safety coordinator. Nolan kept his job only after accepting a demotion and completing new training. To his credit, he did not complain. 6 months later, I returned for the reopening of the hotel's north wing. The western ballroom was gone, replaced by a reinforced observation deck set farther from the cliff. This time, I entered through the front doors wearing the same yellow raincoat and work boots. Tessa saw me first. Dr. Marquez, she said with a smile. Welcome back. Behind her, a new plaque displayed the names of every employee who helped evacuate the building. Jamie's name appeared near the top. Lila's was there too. Mine was not. That had been my request. People often tell this story as if it is about a powerful woman revealing her identity and humiliating those who underestimated her. They are wrong. My title did not make the warning true. My name on the screens did not stop the ocean. We survived because a trainee spoke, a receptionist tried to verify the truth, a security officer finally stepped aside, and hundreds of frightened people eventually listened. Respect should not begin after someone proves their importance, and no one should have to display their power before others decide their voice is worth hearing. Life often sends its most important warnings through people we are tempted to overlook. Never measure someone's worth by their clothes, job title, age, or position, because wisdom and courage do not always arrive wearing authority. Listen before you judge. Speak up when something feels wrong, and never silence the quietest voice in the room simply because it is inconvenient. True leadership is not about protecting pride or appearances. It is about protecting people, admitting mistakes, and acting before it is too late. Respect should be given freely, not offered only after someone proves how powerful or important they are. Thank you for watching until the very end. Please share your thoughts in the comments and subscribe to Karma Tales 35 for more powerful stories. Until next time, take care and goodbye.